What's up, guys? Welcome to Cage Side Connor. I am Connor. This video is going to be about a big question I've been wondering. Can Merab Dvalishvili have the best calendar year inside of the UFC? This is very interesting to me because Merab Dvalishvili already fought twice this year, scheduled to fight for a third time already, claiming he wants to fight a fourth time. So he's already beat Umar Nurmagomedov. He then went on to beat Sean O'Malley for a second time back in June. And then, by the way, he beat Umar back in January. He's scheduled to fight Corey Sandhagen in just a matter of weeks here. I believe only 2 weeks from when I'm recording this, and he'll be taking him on early October. And then he wants to turn around again once more this year and fight Peter Yan in a rematch and defend his belt once again in December. So the big question I'm wondering now is, can Merab Dvalishvili have the best calendar year in the UFC? Who has had the best calendar year in the UFC thus far? And if Merab is going to be able to topple that, to take over that claim of having the best calendar year in the UFC. Before we get into the full video, then, guys, make sure you subscribe to the channel. I do things like preview shows for upcoming UFC cards, post shows for past UFC cards, and then fun little videos like this. If you got any suggestions for fun little videos, let me know in the comments. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, and let me know what you thought of the video towards the end. Thank you so much. All right, let's get into the whole thing then. So, back to what I was saying. Merab Dvalishvili. Here he is. Beat Umar Nurmagomedov back in January earlier this year by unanimous decision. Then went on to beat Sean O'Malley for a second time by a submission in the third round. I believe it was guillotine or some type of modified choke. I forget exactly what we're calling it there. So now I'm wondering, okay, he beats Corey Sandhagen in early October, which I think he's a heavy favorite, and we're all kind of assuming he will. Although I do think there's room for Corey Sandhagen to win that fight there. Of course, Sandhagen has options and ways he can win that fight there. But let's assume he does. He then is saying he wants to turn around and then fight Peter Yan early December or middle of December sometime on the December pay-per-view, which I believe is scheduled for December 12th at the moment. Don't quote me on that. But whatever. So if he turns around and then beats Peter Yan, will Merab Dvalishvili have the best year in the UFC? Let's try to break this down into who does have the best year in the UFC thus far. I've broken this down into 5 people who I think have the 5 best years in the UFC thus far. Now, granted, I do want to say before we get into this, my knowledge of UFC only goes so far back. I became a fan at UFC 100, which was UFC in 2009. So a lot of the UFC events before that are just kind of out of my wheelhouse, out of my I could only do so much research, but like I wasn't there. I couldn't tell you how big some of these fighters were and how big of a year it felt like a lot of these fighters have when I wasn't actively watching the sport then. So you will notice a lot of fighters after 2009 are the ones that make up majority of my top 5 list. I did try to sprinkle one in there just to throw you old heads a bone, the guys that have been watching since the 90s, so you guys don't come at me too much. But let's get into it then. So of course, I want to do some honorable mentions first. I tried to first go through and look at some of the greats. So I looked at, Anderson Silva. I looked at Georges St. Pierre. I tried to figure out who's had the best years just out of the greats thus far. Where I landed, honorable mentions, I want to say first, Anderson Silva 2007. That seemed to be his best year in the UFC. He got 3 wins inside of the UFC. Granted, the 3 wins, one of them was over Patrick Cote, one of them was over Talis Lightis. It's like, not the best wins, but he also submitted Dan Henderson that year. So I figured that's Anderson Silva's best year in the UFC. Great year, but not one of the top 5 best, in my opinion. We then move on, Demetrius Johnson, 2013. This is the year he knocked out Joseph Benavidez in a rematch. He also had 2 other wins that year. John Moraga, he submitted. And that was definitely his best year in the UFC. Not necessarily top 5 worthy, in my opinion. Unfortunately, if DJ would have got one more in that year, he definitely would have been in the top 5 list. Kamaru Usman, 2021. Gotta mention that one. That's the year he knocked out Jorge Masvidal with that brutal right hand. He beat Colby Covington in the rematch. He also knocked out Gilbert Burns early in that year. Definitely his best year, but not top 5 worthy. And then Conor McGregor, 2015. This was the year Conor McGregor rose to stardom. This is when he became a superstar, was that year. It's the year he knocked out Chad Mendes at UFC 189, one of the best pay-per-views, if not the best pay-per-view of all time. Knocked out Jose Aldo in December of that year. I believe he knocked out Dennis Seaver, who's just the GOAT. Everyone knows Dennis Seaver. Everyone loves Dennis Seaver. And he knocked him out early in that year. So that was 3 wins for Conor McGregor. Again, great. All 4 of these, great. Spectacular even. And if you wanted to argue that these are top 5 UFC calendar year worthy, I wouldn't argue with you one bit. But they're not in my list in particular. The last one I got to shout out. I know I said I'm not doing too much before 2009. But the one I do got to shout out, I got to shout out Royce Gracie, the GOAT. 1994. He beat like 9 guys that year. Now, it's unfair because a lot of these guys were in a tournament throughout these years, and he did 3 different tournaments. I believe he beat 9 guys in that single year. Might have even been 10. I'm going to miscount it. But regardless, Royce Gracie, 1994. Gotta shout that one out. It's one of the best years in UFC history. Kind of pre-Zuffa era UFC, so I don't really count these ones as much. Deserves an honorable mention, but not in my top 5 best. There's also Don Fry out there who beat a shit ton of guys in a single year. I forget which year it was exactly. But guys like that, I'm not necessarily counting, except for our first guy. So, number 1, first guy, Randy Couture in 1997. He will be the first one on our list. Randy Couture in 1997 won the UFC 13 heavyweight tournament by beating Tony Ham, and Stephen Graham on the same night on May 30th. Now, I don't necessarily want to count the tournaments because I feel like it's unfair to current day UFC fighters, but you gotta shout this one out. I mean, beat 2 guys on the same fucking night, went on to win the heavyweight tournament. He then went on to beat Vitor Belfort by TKO in later in that year in October. By the way, none of these even started till May 30th, so Randy Couture almost halfway through the year makes it on the top 5 list of one of the best calendar years in UFC history. It's pretty fucking impressive. Like I said, continuing on, he TKO'd Vitor Belfort on October 17th later that year. Very impressive. A very young Vitor Belfort. Old UFC images, man. Look at him. Look at him. Look at that body type. What every man is striving for right there with Randy Couture. Captain America right there. He then went on to beat Maurice Smith at the end of that year for the UFC heavyweight title on December 21st. I mean, it's a great year. That's 4 wins inside of a year. Won a title, won a tournament. He also TKO'd what I'm assuming was a very hot prospect in Vitor Belfort at that time. So, good on him. Has to be included in the top 5 list, in my opinion. I don't think this is the best, but I do think this is definitely top 5 worthy. Randy Couture, natural. Love him. Went on then, of course, to become UFC light heavyweight champion. And then recaptured the UFC heavyweight gold at some point later in his career as well. Gotta shout out the natural Randy Couture. Definitely top 5 worthy. Not the guy I'm counting as number 1 to go head to head with Merab Dvalishvili, but nonetheless, I do think deserves a spot on this list. My second guy, Jon Jones, 2011. We're jumping all the way to 2011 now. This is Jon Jones' best year in his career, bar none, in my opinion. 4 wins inside this year. Went on to beat, first starting off on February 5th, 2011, he beat Ryan Bader via sub round 2. Accepts a title fight in the post-fight interview. I think this is a very iconic moment in the sport at this point. We all kind of remember this one. Joe Rogan kind of getting down. I think they told him beforehand, Jon Jones, like, hey, you win, we're going to offer you a title shot, but whatever, it doesn't matter. It's still just a badass thing to say that he accept the title shot against a very scary opponent at that time, against Mauricio Shogun Rua. So yeah, Jon Jones, 2011, beat Ryan Bader, who, of course, Ryan Bader wasn't Ryan Bader at that point. He was a young, hot prospect. He was kind of the number 2 hot prospect right behind Jones at that time. That's kind of how he was being talked about. And so, of course, Ryan Bader, pretty young in his career. Not the most impressive win to beat Ryan Bader in 2011, but still, nonetheless, I mean, you got to think, too, at this time, Jon Jones is only 23. Ryan Bader's like 28 at this point. So it's like Ryan Bader's way closer to his prime than Jon Jones is at this point in time. And he walked right through him. Continuing on then, like I said, accepted the title shot against Mauricio Shogun Rua, and then went on to beat Mauricio Shogun Rua on March 19th, 2011, later that year by TKO. Absolutely demolished him. And this is a problem I have with people nowadays, is they will try to discredit Jon Jones because they just don't like him personally, and try to discredit this year by saying a lot of fighters were past their prime. Mauricio Shogun, who are 28 years old when he fought John Jones, 28, 29. That is directly in their prime, if not a little bit before their prime. When are we ever saying nowadays, like, oh, a guy's 29, he's past his prime? I don't care if he had a lot of miles on the track already back in Pride days. Like, still, a 29-year-old veteran MMA fighter is well in his prime. You know, I do not care. I do not consider this to be a lesser version of Shogun just simply because we're out of Pride and we're in the UFC now. No, this was top dog, the best Shogun ever was in his career. Was on March 19th, 2011, and John Jones absolutely dominated him. Continuing on with that year, then, now he has the belt, so he's defending the belt now against Quentin Rampage Jackson. Defeated him via fourth round submission on September 24th, 2011. I mean, just super impressive. Again, you can argue Rampage a little bit past his prime. He was 33 during this fight, so you know, okay, you want to argue Rampage was out of his prime at 33? I disagree. You know, it's again, we would never argue today that a guy who's 33 years old is out of his prime. I don't care how many fights he's had beforehand. Never in a million years would we say that. That's like saying Volk was out of his prime when or Max was out of his prime when he lost to Ilya or something like that. You know, it's insane to say that these guys are out of their prime because of their age when John Jones isn't even in his prime yet. If anything, John Jones is the one at a disadvantage during these fights. Now, granted, you can bring up steroids and all that. I won't argue with you there. John Jones definitely did steroids, and it should definitely discredit a lot of the things he did throughout his career. But he didn't get caught for steroids on this night, so I still give him credit for a lot of these wins. His last win that year was Lyoto Machida. He submitted him in round 2. This awesome image, one of the most iconic images of the sport, on December 10th, 2011. And that's 4 fights. That's 4 huge fights. Not 4 title fights within a calendar year in 2011. This is probably the one I'm picking. This is probably the best year in UFC history thus far, best calendar year in UFC history thus far. And I think it's it's not inarguable, but again, it's very hard to put anything else against this. Beating a hot prospect in Ryan Bader and going on to TKO Shogun, who was a monster at the time, for the bout. Defeated Rampage Jackson, who was a legendary veteran at that point, and then defeating Lyoto Machida, who was a former UFC champ and also one of the best in the division and looked at as another scary guy in that division at that time. Yeah, I think this is probably the best calendar year in UFC history thus far that we've gone through, but we will continue on with more. My next fighter, of course, then, is Daniel Cormier, 2018. This is what I consider to be the best year in Daniel Cormier's career. First thing he did was defeated Volkan Ozdemir by TKO round 2 on January 20th, 2018. Yeah, this was probably his least impressive win that year, just considering who Volkan Ozdemir is. But nonetheless, still a very good win. Volkan Ozdemir was a hot prospect at the time. I believe he was on a 3-fight knockout streak. He always did the watch thing where he fucking pointed at his wrist. It was cool. I think Ozdemir still tries to do that. I mean, Ozdemir's still one of those guys kicking around. Continuing on, then he went on to knock out Stipe Miocic in round 1 for the UFC heavyweight title. This was DC going up in weight classes to try to capture a second belt. The UFC gave him a shot at that, and he did the damn thing. He knocked Stipe out round 1. Of course, he would go on to lose both rematches with Stipe, but it doesn't matter. 2018, I mean, he was just on fire. This was DC's year for sure. To close out that year, at the MSG card on November 3rd, 2018, he submitted Derek Lewis, which, again, not the most impressive title defense, but still, Derek Lewis is Derek Lewis. I mean, has the most knockout wins in UFC history, was even better at this time. I mean, shit. It's already 7 fucking years ago, and Derek Lewis is still around doing the damn thing. But this was probably prime Derek Lewis, and DC absolutely just walked through him. Again, not the one I'm picking to go head to head with Merab Dvalishvili's year, but Daniel Cormier, definitely a top 5 year in the UFC, in my opinion. Continuing on to my next fighter, then. Number 4, Kevin Holland, 2020. This is the only non-champ on the list, a guy that's never been able to capture the belt. But it's just such a goddamn impressive year that we gotta shout it out. 5 wins inside of a single calendar year. Now, there are other fighters who have had 5 wins in a single calendar year, but I think Kevin Holland is the most impressive. Neil Magny had 5 wins in a single calendar year. I just feel like Kevin Holland's level of opponents are a bit better than Neil Magny's was. Cowboy Cerrone also beat 5 opponents in a single year, but he also has a loss that year. He fought 6 times that year, has 1 loss, 5 wins. And I'm counting that loss heavily against him. You're out of the list if you have a loss in that year. But yeah, like I was saying, Kevin Holland, Thiago Santos as well. That was the other one. He has 5 wins in a single year. But I believe he lost one of them. He might have fought a 6th time and then lost. So he's out. He's out already. Kevin Holland, listen to this list though. It's so fucking good now. Looking back on it, defeated Anthony Fluffy Hernandez by TKO round 1 on May 16th, 2020. Now Fluffy, of course, not the guy he is in 2025, but still, beating Fluffy is beating Fluffy. I believe this is Fluffy's only loss in the UFC still. He might have one other one earlier, even before this. But still, a win over Fluffy is such a good look on your resume. Continuing on, TKO'd Joaquin Buckley in round 3 on August 8th, 2020. By the way, another one, Kevin Holland. This didn't start till May 16th, 2020, so almost halfway through the year, and he's just starting this, and he gets 5 wins in. It's insane. Like I was saying, went on to defeat Joaquin Buckley by TKO round 3 on August 8th later that year. I mean, speaks for itself. Joaquin Buckley now top 5 welterweight in the world, or top 6, whatever he is, ranked after the Kamaru Usman loss. But regardless, still an extremely impressive win looking back on it. Went on to beat Darren Stewart by split decision later that year. He then beat Charlie Ontiveros. I don't know how to pronounce this man's last name. Funny, this is the only guy that doesn't have a current. He's not currently still in the UFC, or is not a well-known name. I know Darren Stewart not currently in the UFC either, but this guy never went on to become shit. And he knocked this guy out, TKO'd him round 1 via slam, dislocated his shoulder, as you can see there. And then his last win in 2020, Jacare Souza, probably Kevin Holland's most impressive win still to this day, was knocking out Jacare Souza from bottom. Was just down there on the mat. Jacare took him down. Kevin's down there blabbing away at him and just starts hitting him with hammer fists from the bottom. Ends up rocking him from bottom. Gets up a little bit, hits him with this big right hand like you can see, and just knocks Jacare Souza out. Jacare Souza, of course, a little bit older at this time. I believe he's pushing 40. But still, win over Jacare Souza was a win over Jacare Souza, who's still very good towards the end of his career. I mean, went to split decision with Jan Blachowicz right towards the end of his career. I wonder what Jacare is doing nowadays. I mean, Jacare not one of those guys you hear is like in BKFC or whatever the fuck. He should just do jiu-jitsu tournaments until the end of the time. They'll probably kill him. Whatever. It's besides the point. Kevin Holland, 2020. 5 wins in a single calendar year. Probably the most impressive 5-fight win streak inside of a single calendar year. Like I was saying, Thiago Santos, Neil Magny, Cowboy Cerrone also have them, but I think Kevin Holland is the most impressive, especially looking at the names, looking back on them. Of course, a lot of these guys went on to become great later, but regardless, I think this deserves a mention inside of the top 5 of the best calendar years in UFC history. The last fighter I am now going to go with, Alex Pereira, 2024. You know it well. You watching this video, you probably know exactly what this year was. It's funny putting this year on here because there was an argument between Alex Pereira and Ilia Topuria for best fighter of the year. I thought Pereira ran away with it. I mean, having one more fight than the other guy really puts you over, in my opinion. I mean, I think it's a lot about activity. Of course, Ilia Topuria that year knocked out Max Holloway, knocked out Alexander Volkanovski. Very impressive, but that's not top 5 worthy, in my opinion. Alex Pereira, 2024. He first, of course, defended the belt at UFC 300 against Jamal Hill, knocking him clean the fuck out, and then doing this, hitting him with the pose. He then knocked out Yuri Prohaska in a rematch with a head kick. And then towards the end of the year, in October 2024, he TKO'd Clear Roundtree in what was a Fight of the Year contender. So yeah, you gotta mention this year. I mean, I think it was an incredible run. Jamal Hill, Yuri Prohaska, Clear Roundtree, still probably considered the top 3 guys in the light heavyweight division right now, besides Ankalaev and Pereira. And Yuri Prohaska, Clear Roundtree fighting in a matter of weeks, to be fair. And we'll see who's better between them, but very much look forward to that fight. Regardless, though, I feel like you got to throw Alex Pereira 2024 in the top 5 best years in UFC history, calendar years, that is. So yeah, those are the 5 that I bring you. I would ask you to judge for yourself. Do you think Merab can surpass all 5 of these? Do you consider John Jones's 2011 to be the best year in UFC history, best calendar year in UFC history, like I do? Do you think Merab has a chance to surpass that? I think he does. I think he does. Especially depending on the way he is able to beat Corey Sandhagen and Peter Yan. If that actually does end up happening, I think he could. I mean, if he beats Umar Nurmagomedov by decision, that's extremely impressive. Very hot prospect. Probably second best guy in the division, if I had to say, in Umar Nurmagomedov, and was able to win 3 rounds clean over him and really dominate him towards the end of that fight. Then beats Sean O'Malley in a rematch. Not only beats him, but finishes him. If he's able to finish Corey Sandhagen and or Peter Yan inside that same year, I think it goes head to head, if not surpasses John Jones, especially considering it would be 4 title defenses inside of the same year, which John Jones does not have, to his credit. And I think it'd be a bit more impressive than DC's, even considering the weight class change. I just think the caliber of opponent would be a bit higher. Obviously, he's a bit more impressive than Kevin Holland. Only 1 less fight and all title defenses. Would be more impressive than Randy Couture's, even though he also has 4 fights, but still not to the same level of opponent that Merab would be beating. And then would be more impressive than Alex Pereira's 2024, considering he would have 1 more fight than him and all title defenses, which Alex Pereira's were too, to be fair. But regardless, that is my case. I think Merab can do it. I just think he has to get past Corey Sandhagen, and then we have to actually book this Peter Yan fight. And then he's probably got it in the bag. I would imagine Merab would be a heavy favorite in both those fights, both those rematches, or just the rematch with Peter Yan, excuse me. But he would be a heavy favorite, I'd imagine, in that as well. And that's my case, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know who you think has had the best calendar year in UFC history thus far. Let me know why you hate John Jones so much, because I know you're gonna say it. And then let me know if you think Merab has a chance to surpass him. It should be very interesting. Merab would definitely run away with fight of the year if he's able to get past Corey Sandhagen. I think he's already got it locked up if he just beats Corey Sandhagen. But then you add in a Peter Yan rematch on top of that. Get out of here. That'd be insane. Alright guys, that will do it for the video. Remember to subscribe to the channel. And let me know how much you liked the video. And then make sure you hit the thumbs up shit. Do all that bullshit. Appreciate it. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.